executions for death. Sir John Whig had been one of the leaders of Gayrel insurrection and had been beaten with his troops by Lord Ross and Murdrake, and had disbanded his men and fled to the house of his uncle Mr. Gavin Crowtrain and Craigmire. He had been informed against by his uncle's wife, taken to Edinburgh, and had been paraded, bound, and bareheaded through the streets by the executioner, then on the 3rd of July flung into Tolbooth to await the trial for high treason, and now the trial was over, and Sir John was commended to die. As he now sat on the benches of his cell, it was not the stroke of the death that terrified him, but the pardoning of his children, who would be left orphaned and penniless, for the crown would seize his goods. No friend or kinsman had been allowed to visit him, but now that his death was assured, greater license had been granted. But anxious to deprive his enemies of a chance to accuse his sons, he had sent them commands that he should abstain from using this permission until the night before his execution. He had obeyed, but not satisfied Grizzle. One night of his condemnment he heard the key turn in his door, thinking it would be the jailer, but then a pair of arms were flung around his neck, and his daughter was weeping on his neck. From that day she had continued to visit him, and now she sat beside him, staring at the light fading outside. Both father and daughter knew that it was almost time. Grizzle asked, "And this message? Tell me the truth. Have you any hope from it?" It was an appeal made by Sir John, the Earl of Dundonald, the Father Peters, the King Confessor, who often dictated to him, as well known on matters of the state, but in the short time who there be time to press this appeal, the excerpt that influenced in London, which alone could stay the death warrant. "There is no hope in that quarter," said Sir John. Grizzle knew that he spoke only what she already knew. Would they spare any man now in their revenge? Pursue her father? "Father," Grizzle suddenly, "could you spare me for your side for a few days?" Sir John looked up. He knew that she had formed a plan in her mind, and that nothing could chance of winning his safety. Could he take from her now, of all times? "My child," he said, "you are going to attempt something." She nodded with a brighter face than she had worn for many days. "And what would you attempt?" he went on in an impossibility. "Nothing impossible to a true heart," she said. "And who will you help?" "No one." She was standing before him.
Is that new wallpaper?
She was standing before him, and in the twilight he could see her eyes lit up with hope, her figure upright, and as if a man's straightened. "My girl, you will run into danger, into blame. They will not spare you, and do you know the characters of those men whom you will have sue?" She bent and kissed him. "I am a Cochrane, my father." Early the next morning, Grizzle Cochrane was mounted on horseback and riding towards the border. She had dressed herself and She had dressed herself, this girl of 18, as young serving woman, and when she arrived at the wayside cottage for food and drink, professed herself journeying on the borrowed horse to the visit mother. By noon, Edinburgh was far behind, but she pressed on that day and most of the following night. On the second day, she crossed the Tweed and came in safety to the home of an old nurse on English side, 4 miles behind the town of Berwick. "Land's sake!" cried the old woman, who was astonished to find the horsewoman leapt to the ground and planted a kiss on her cheek. "If it isn't Miss Grizzle in the house, implore Grizzle. I have something to tell you that won't be kept." She knew the old nurse was to be trusted and told her secret. "Even now," she said, "the postman is writing from London with a warrant in his leg. I must stop him and make him give up to me, or my father's head is the penalty." "But what use to talk of this when the postman is armed? How is a mere girl saving your presence to do all this? Look here." Grizzle unrolled a bundle which she had brought from Edinburgh. It held up a horseman's cloak and a brace of pistols. "Now," she said, "where are the clothes of Donald, my foster brother from when he was younger? Little doubt they'll fit me." For this was the brave girl's plan. For those times, the mail from London took 8 days on this journey to Edinburgh. By posing herself of the warrant for her father's death and obtaining it, she could count on delay of 16 or 17 days at least before application could be made for a second, and that sigh and sent to Scotch capital. By this delay, time enough would be won, for her friends in London could use all their influence to stop the sentence. It sounded impossible, but as she said, nothing is impossible to a true heart. She had learned the places where the postmen rested on their journey. One of the places was a small inn kept by a widow on the outskirts of Belford. There, that men who received the bag of dirham would arrive at 6 in the morning, the map before finishing his journey, and at Belford Grizzle had determined to meet him. She rode southward and grew up before the inn at Belford just an hour before the postman had continued to come south and dispose himself to sleep. Grizzle stabled her horse and strode into the parlor, inquired after food and drink. Sitting down, answered the old woman at the table, "For the best I have to give you is there, and please keep quiet, for there's one asleep I don't wish to disturb." She pointed to the food on the table, which were the remains of the sleeping man's meal. Grizzle sat down before them, considered herself a while. She played with a mouthful or two, and then asked, "Can I have a drink of water?" Her hostess replied, "Are ye a water drinker? 'Tis an old custom. I know so, and when I put up at an inn, 'tis my custom always to pay for it, and price of stronger drink which I cannot take." "Fair enough." The landlady brought a jug of water and set it on the board. "Is the well where you got this water nearby, Grizzle?" said Grizzle, pouring out the glass, sipping at it. "For it is no trouble to fetch some fresh for me. I will tell you this is rather warm and flat," added the girl. "'Tis a good way off," answered the woman, "but I cannot refuse to fetch for so civil a lad sitting there, and I'll be as quick as I can, but take care and don't meddle with it." with the man's pistol there, for they are loaded. She took the pitcher and went out to draw the water. No sooner was Grizzle left alone when she listened to the footsteps as they dead away in the distance. They crept swiftly across the floor to the place where the postman lay asleep. He lay in one of the closest wooden bedsteads like cupboards which were then common in the houses of the poor. The door of it was left half open to give the sleeper air, and the noise of his snoring issued in the way that shook the house. It seemed to the girl that he must be awakened by the creaking of the floor under her footsteps. Lightly she crept up to the bed and pulled the door wider ajar, peeped in the hope of seeing the mailbag and being able to pounce upon it. She saw it, but to her dismay, it lay beneath the man's head. The postman used it as a pillow and had flung himself so heavily across it as it gave not the faintest hope that anyone could pull it away without disturbing him from his nap. As she stood helplessly looking from the bag which contained the fatal warrant to the unconscious face of the man before her, Grizzle made up her mind to another plan. She turned to the table, grabbed the postman's holster, and pulled out the pistols, quickly drawing secreting the chargers, and returned them to their cases, and took her seat again at the foot of the table. Hardly had she done so when she heard the old woman returning with the pitchers. Grizzle took a drink, and having settled her bill, much to the landlady's satisfaction, prepared to set off. She asked how much longer the other guest was likely to sleep. By the noise he makes, he intends to sleep till doomsday, she said, laughing. Ah, poor man, he is a hard life, said the hostess, and little more than half an hour before he must be on the highway again. Grizzle laughed once more, and mounting her horse, set off at a trot along the road southward, as if continuing her journey in that direction. Hardly had she gotten past the town, however, when, turning the horse's head, she saw the horse gently back, awaiting the coming up of the postman. Though all her mind was set on the plan before her, she could not help a shiver of terror as she set on the chance of her tampering with the pistols being discovered and her loading place but had been chosen of her course, and now she must go through with it. It may be imagined that her heart began to beat quickly as her ear caught the sound of hoofs on the road behind her, and turning, she saw the man whose face she had been gazing on an hour ago trotting briskly towards her. The mail bags, there were two, one containing the letters directly from London, the others containing those taken up different post offices on the road, strapped one on each side of his saddle in front, close to the holsters. Her nerve came back, and as she drew nearer, she saluted him with perfect calmness, put her horse into the same pace with his, and rode on his company. The man was inclined for conversation as they rode. He chatted freely. When they were about halfway between Belford and Berwick, Grizzly judged it was time. Pulling her horse's reins gently, so as to bring her close to her company, she said in low but perfectly determined voice, "Friend, I have taken a fancy for those mailing bags of yours. I must have them. Therefore, take my advice and deliver them up quickly, for I am providing for all hazards. I am mounted on fast horse. I carry firearms, and moreover, I am allied with those who are stronger than I. You see that wood yonder," she continued, pointing to one about half a mile away. "Take my advice, give me your bags and speed back away. Don't dare approach the wood for at least 2 hours." The postman's eyes had grown wider. "If you say me as soon as his tongues, you mean. Make yourself merry at my expense. You are welcome. I can see a joke, so you have your laugh. I am one to take offense to the words of a foolish boy. But if and here he whipped a pistol from his holster and turned the muzzle on her face. "You are mad enough to be serious that I am ready for you." They have come to a stand in the middle of the road, and Grizzle looked at the mouth of the pistol, not a yard away from her cheek. Nevertheless, she answered, if you have a double, dismiss it. I am quite in the earnest." The postman, with his hand on the trigger, hesitated. "I think, my lad, you seem of age when robbing a garden or a man or a old woman's fruit stall would be fit you better. If so be, you must return thief than taking his Majesty's mail upon the highway from me. Be thankful you have met with one who will not shed blood if you can help it, and go your way before I am provoked to fire." "Sir," said Grizzle, you are a worthy man, nor am I fonder of bloodshed than you. But, sir, if you will be persuaded, what shall I do? For I have said, and it is true, the mail I will have. Choose then, and will this—" She pulled out a pistol and from another of her cloak, and cocking it, presenting it to his face. "Then your blood is on your own head," cried the postman, and raising the pistol again, he pulled the trigger. The flashing in the pan, dashing the weapon to the ground, he pulled out another, and aiming it at Grizzle's face, fired with the same result. In a furious passion, he flung down this pistol too, sparing from his horse, and dashing forward to seize her. She dug her spurs into her horse and just moved forward a pace or two. The girl saw her opportunity to seize it. Another dig with the spurs, and her horse leveled with another. Leaning forward, she caught at the bridle, and calling to the pair, in the instant with a gallop off along the highway, leaving the postman helpless and staring. She had gone about 100 yards with her prize. When she looked back, her foe was still standing in the middle of the road, stupefied. Hey, Anthony, can you say that word? Stupefied. That means he was very surprised that she was able to win. Stupefied with amazement at the turn which affairs had taken, shouting to him to remember her advice about the wood, she put both the horses to their speed, and looking back once more, was gratified to find that the postman impressed with the truth of her threat, had turned and was making the best of her way back to Belford. When she arrived at the woods, Grizzle tied the postman's horse at the tree far from the road and unfastened the straps of the mailbags. With a knife, she ripped them open and searched for the government's dispatch among their contents. To find these was not difficult, owing to their address to the council in Edinburgh. There she discovered not only the warrant for her father's death, but also many other sentencings inflicting punishment in varied degrees on the men who had been taken in the late risings. Time was pressing. She could not stop to examine the warrants, but quickly tearing them into small pieces, placing them carefully in her bosom. Having arranged all the private papers as far as possible, she had found them. Grizzle mounted her horse and rode off. The postman's horse and the mailbags, she imagined, would soon be found from the hints which she had given the man about the woods. She set her horse at a gallop again, and did not stop until she reached the cottage of her nurse, where she burned not only the warrant for her father's death, but the remainder of the sentences on his fellow prisoners. Having satisfied that all trace of the papers was consumed, she put on her female garments and was once more gentle and unassuming. Miss Grizzle Contrain. She left her pistols and cloaks to be concealed by the nurse, and again she set forth on her journey, resting only at the most sequestered cottages, and riding as hard as she might to reach Edinburgh in safety early the next morning. It remains only to be said that the time won by this devoted girl was enough to gain the end for which she strove, and Sir John Contrain regained his pardon. The state of public affairs rendered it prudent for many years that this action of Grizzle Contrain should be kept secret, but after the Revolution, when men could speak more freely, her heroism was known and applauded. She lived to marry Mr. Kerr of Morriston in Burswickshire, and Doubtless was a good wife and had proved herself a daughter. So, do you remember what she did?
She won a race or something?
No, she saved her father. She saved her father, who was in prison, and a whole bunch of other people that was in prison.
Why is her horse?
And tomorrow you get to color her horse. You get to draw her horse. So we're done with that. Now we get to do science.
I'm still playing the phone, right? After we're done.
Oh.
Did you forget about the videos I saw?
We get to do true or false for potbelly pigs. Do potbelly pigs make excellent pets for small children?
Oh, I don't.
No. Potbelly pigs are very smart and can be trained to do many things.
Yes. You obviously know that.
So that's yes. Pigs are very dirty and can smell bad.
Yes, they can be.
No. They are very clean.
We'll just put some, because some of them can.
Some, but are usually clean. Are usually clean. Pigs should never be allowed to get wet.
It has to be clean somehow.
So that is False. They like to get wet. Pigs make good pets because they don't need a special diet. They can eat scraps and old spoiled food. No?
Why is he writing these things?
Kids. Pigs make good pets for people who are allergic to dogs and cats. So that is true.
We're allergic to pigs.
Pigs don't usually have hair. And pigs, did you know that sometimes they can use pig skin for grafting on humans? Yeah, they do that sometimes. Pigs can be successfully trained as service animals to help people with disabilities.
They could.
Yep, they do. Pigs can be kept indoors all day long, every day, and make great pets for people who live in apartments and small houses with no yards.
I like that litter box.
If you have a litter box, so we'll say true, if you have a litter box and you play with them. Litter box. And play with them because they get bored, right?
How does it put the play?
Play with them.
What if you put dem? D-E-M.
All right, we're all done with schoolwork.
Next line here.
So, everybody, we would like to say goodbye to you today. This one was a little bit longer because we did the chocolate challenge. But thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed the history lesson today and the chocolate challenge. And Anthony would like to say goodbye to you. And so we'll do some other stuff later in the week. So have a good day. God bless you, and we love you all. Bye.
Remember to punch the like button and subscribe.
Goodbye.
Bye.